Okay, in this video we're going to be talking about dynamic loft. Dynamic loft is different to static loft. So static loft is the club just sitting here, my 54-degree wedge. It has 54 degrees of loft. Dynamic loft is the loft delivered to the ball at impact. So a common trait that I see of all really good, let's say pitchers, because I've got a sand wedge here, is that they de-loft the club coming into impact. And a common trait I see of poor golfers is they do the opposite. They try to elevate the ball and lift the ball into the sky. So it's not uncommon to see a 40-degree dynamic loft, meaning I just hit a ball just before and I had 40 degrees of loft delivered at impact. If I can show you now, I've got my 54 degree just to prove it to you. And I'll go ahead and hit one here, trying to hit just a normal pitch shot. You'll see that the dynamic loft is around 42. So it's not uncommon to see, somewhere in the vicinity of 10 to 15 degrees of forward shaft lean at impact, which helps get your ball flight to track down. I first saw this, obviously playing on tour a little bit as well, saw a lot of the good players that I used to play with would flight their wedges a lot lower. Now, I remember being at the US Open on the practice ground at Erin Hills in 2017 and watching Jim Furyk hit some 70, 80-yard pitch shots across the corner of the green to a really tight flag, but the ball was coming in extraordinarily low. I couldn't believe how low it was coming out, but it was stopping extraordinarily fast. I remember spending half an hour that day just watching his ball flight from the side like a rainbow. It wasn't going like this, and it wasn't definitely going like that. He wasn't using the height to stop it. He had no green to work with, but that ball was coming in really low with a lot of spin and checking. The second thing I noticed is that he barely was taking a divot. He was just clipping it off the top. And I think this is the trait of all the best wedge players, is that they learn how to de-loft it, reduce the dynamic loft, or reduce the loft, but still manage to be shallow. So the problem with a lot of amateur golfers out there and that have been taught to try and de-loft it, I guess, to flight their ball down low with their wedges, is that they usually believe that forward shaft lean means steep angle of attack. Now that steep angle of attack provides a huge divot and it obviously shies people away from hitting it low. Yeah, of course, moving the ball back and having the hands forward is going to help you compress it, put some pressure on the ball, which is what we're after. But how do we maintain that forward shaft lean, but have the club come in nice and shallow? This is the secret to great wedge play. And I think I must highlight that there's two different things between forward shaft lean and a steep angle of attack. I think a lot of golfers struggle with this concept in their head that as soon as I push the shaft forward, I'll naturally have a steep angle of attack. Now, generally the case that is true somewhat, because most players that have their hands forward will have the ball back in their stance, which ultimately makes you pick it up more and then drop the club down steep. But how do we get, like, say, a Jim Furyk or a Zach Johnson or a Stricker or any of these top world-class wedge players that still deliver forward shaft lean but are quite shallow? I can have a forward shaft lean here and have a 0 angle of attack. So this club head's just traveling like that, right? So this is really important, this visual here, for you to understand. I can also have, a very vertical shaft and a steep angle of attack. Two different things. So I want to show you a little drill on how we can keep the shaft forward, but at the same time have a nice shallow angle attack. So we reduce our flight, but we don't compromise our strike with a steep descent into the ball and take those big divots that feels like the club gets stuck into the ground. So grab an alignment stick to start with. What I'll get players to do is just place it on the ground like so. Now you can see I've got a bit of forward shaft lean. Now simply we're just going to make some swings, turning the body, supporting the pivot with my body, keeping this stick on the ground, making sure that I maintain some forward shaft lean. My wrist angles are going to feel like that I've got some extension in my right and some flexion in my left. And we're dragging it through. So you want to feel like you're landing an airplane. this way. We don't want to land the aeroplane nose dive straight into the ground. We want to feel like we're gradually glancing along the ground, and then we're actually, if you notice closely, I'm exiting up and pulling the handle up. This little point here, I think it's important to pay attention to. Yes, I can come down steep, but then if I start with the club on the ground and start pulling it up, it actually becomes quite a shallow motion through the ball. So then we transition that from the stick to the golf club, and we do the same thing. Drag and scrape and exit like so, maintaining, you'll see here, maintaining this forward shaft lean dynamic loft. So I'll try hit one again for you and demonstrate. So it's going to feel like I'm dragging the club low through the ground. Exiting up nice and high, but I still have forward shaft lean, and that one didn't pick up. I'll go again. Hopefully this one collects it. Yeah, a little bit too much. I overdid that one there, but you can see by trying to increase forward shaft lean but making it nice and shallow. I'll just click on to the attack angle. Very shallow there, super shallow, only almost zero. So that's kind of what I was trying to I guess feel there was a really shallow angle of attack. So I only had 0.7 of a angle of attack down. Now, poor pitchers you'll see tend to have a far too steep angle of attack, usually because the ball is so far back. They pick it up, they drop it down, club gets stuck in the ground. Lots of inconsistencies come from that. So I guess the two main things are today, dynamic loft is the loft delivered at impact. We want to try and, if using a 54 degrees, you want to aim for around 40 to 44, somewhere in that range. You know, there's a little bit of flexibility either side of that, depending on the shot you're trying to play. If you have access to a TrackMan or a flight scope, I would definitely ask your coach to have a look at that. If you're somebody that releases the club too early, like so, that would increase the dynamic loft, means your ball would launch a lot higher. You may have a tough time in the wind, you may have a tough time controlling distance. There are other ways to reduce the dynamic loft as well. The easiest way I get players to do that is just simply change clubs. If you want to hit a flighted lower shot, don't use your 54, use your 50. Or use your 48, use your pitching wedge, nothing wrong with that. You'll see a lot of really good pictures of the golf ball, flighting the ball down lower, simply by just using less loft. And quite the opposite for the poor pitchers of the golf ball. They typically default, go to their 60-degree wedge, go really hard, really steep, big divot, ball flies up really high, can't control distance. So I primarily don't try to coach that with a lot of my players that I'm helping them with their pitching. Tend to find a lot of irregularities and inconsistencies there. Using too much loft, the ball tends to slide up the face. But that's for another discussion. I think moving forward, if you're really struggling with your pitching, try and use less loft and try and practice that landing the club on the ground. Gliding, we want to glide the back of the club onto the ground, not the front leading edge. And secondly, hopefully today you understand the difference between forward shaft lean and a steep angle of attack. They're two different things. Don't confuse them. You can have forward shaft lean and be shallow, as I've just shown you. Hopefully this makes sense for you all out there. You want to improve your pitching, reduce your dynamic loft, try and get your attack angle down a little bit shallower, and I think your pitching will improve a ton. Thanks for watching. Feel free, if you like this video, to make a comment, or if you have any questions on the topic I just spoke about, I'll be happy to answer them for you. And if you want to see more videos like this, I'll be updating this YouTube channel as we progress with more high performance training videos. Thanks very much.